when I think about those top schools, those tours were always just better. The tour guides were always just more free, and it didn't feel like they were scripted as much. Because the one school we went to, the entire time I was thinking, this guy is so scripted. I wish he would just actually talk about how he's feeling. And then at the end of the tour, all the tours ended in the same spot, and he was talking, and the group next to us, the girl that was giving that tour was saying the exact same thing. And I was like, everybody's saying the same thing. Nobody's putting any personalization into this at all. They're just word vomiting at me, and it didn't feel like they cared as much.
Welcome to Mission Admissions, a podcast that helps higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and leaders. I'm your host, Jeremy Tears, and every other week I'll share my candid conversations with industry leaders and difference makers from both inside and outside of higher ed. You'll walk away with advice, tips, and strategies to help you both professionally and personally. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tears, and this is episode 49 of the Mission Admissions podcast. I'm ending season 3 with a unique and what I think will be a very insightful episode with my guest, Mickey Baines, and his son, Reece, who is about to be a high school junior. Mickey works on the higher ed partner side, and about a month ago, I noticed a LinkedIn post talking about how he and his family were going to pack up the RV and go up and down the East Coast and do a bunch of campus visits to different colleges and universities. And so I thought it would be interesting to bring them both on to talk about the experiences they had and just how the college search process is going from both the student and parent point of view. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Reece, I'm going to start with you because I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast, I was just telling you and your dad when we were getting ready to get started recording, are on the admissions and marketing side. And so if you had right now to pick one word, do your best to just pick one word to describe how you're feeling about this whole college search process, what would it be?
I'd say excited. I'm pretty excited.
Why is that?
Looking at the future, just looking at my future, and a lot of the colleges seem really cool and places I'd like to go.
Okay.
So it's just exciting.
Dad, how are you feeling about all this?
Well, my one word would be uncertain. We've visited probably 2/3 of all the schools we're going to see. We'll see more than most families. And we've seen 2/3, and I thought, well, maybe we'd knock out 50 to 60% of them on the tours and start whittling that list down. And I think we've knocked out 30%, maybe. So maybe 25%. So uncertain, I think coming back from this first real leg of this effort, rethinking, well, what does the process look like to get the list down? Because I don't know that we're going to apply, or the hope is that we don't apply for 20 schools.
And I would love to know, Reece, so I talk with a lot of students and parents throughout this process, and we do a lot of surveys. And this idea of, all right, it's your college search, right? You're going to be the one going to college, but yet there's so much, right, that you just don't know as a high school junior. How is this balance of, Reece, you got to make these decisions, but yet mom and dad are here to guide you? I mean, Reece, talk to me about that when it comes to understanding, how did you decide how many schools you were going to visit? And, as you're doing these different visits, talk to me about any of that in terms of what you kind of feel like you have to take responsibility for and where your parents have kind of helped you.
So I didn't really decide how many schools we were going to visit. There was a list that started I'd say a year ago, and it was just a huge list of all the schools that we were going to see. And then as more we researched, that list got narrowed down, and my parents all have they have their opinions on each of the schools we visit, and I listen to all that, but then I have my own opinions that I keep private because it's my opinion and I don't want it ripped apart, and I just want to think what I think about some of the schools without it having to be changed. So I just keep that in mind. I take some notes in my phone, just of things that I remember from all the schools, to just keep in mind my personal opinions on it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I, as the dad of a teenage girl my daughter literally turned 15 in the last couple of days, I'm not shocked that you don't tell your parents everything, because I know she doesn't tell us everything. I would be curious, Reece, though, you talked about doing research, right? So for you personally, Reece, not your parents, but for you, when you were looking at these different schools, whether it was on your phone or just even as we're going to get to talking more about these visits, what are some things that you were paying attention to most or looking to learn?
When I was looking at schools, I was in ninth grade at the time, so it wasn't really I was looking for anything specific, but I just took note of the intramural options, just the amount of ways to do things outside of education. Because I looked at them a lot of times while I was sitting in school, and I was like, well, I don't want to think about school while I'm sitting here in school. So I looked at all of what my opportunities would be outside of the classroom, just to see what their options were.
Mickey, I would love to know, we're going to get into these campus visits. Obviously, I'm sure you had some preconceived notions about how this trip that you just went on as a family was going to go. So what's the biggest thing that surprised you about all these campus visits?
I'll divide that into two components that answer. So I'd say what surprised me coming out of them for Reece was which schools he was most interested in versus those he weren't, with the idea that I thought he would finish high school and enroll in a college that's probably around 1,500 to 2,500 students, about an hour and a half to 2.5 hours from home, because he's fairly introverted. He's not going to walk into a room of 500 people and take charge. And so I thought, well, okay, his mom went to a smaller school. I went to a very large school. So I thought he would kind of gravitate similarly to her. And when we got to some of the campuses, two in particular of the larger, probably I would say the three largest schools we visited are among his three favorites. And of those three, the closest to our home of the three is 4.5 hours. Depending on traffic, could be 6. And so that was it was a big surprise for me. I don't have any real hard opinion on whether that's the right fit. I think we'll probably see that with him over the next year. So that was, I would say, from the parental side, biggest surprise for me. On the other side of it, from knowing a little bit more about what's happening on the back end, I don't know what was most surprising. I think I confirmed a lot of held beliefs about what the experience would be and what it would not be. Tailored, personalized, not at all, not from anyone, was what I expected. And that is what we've had to the most part. You've received how many postcards?
Oh, I don't know, but a decent amount of postcards.
Decent amount. And I don't know what the right timing is on a postcard. If I want to send it after a tour, I think we got one this week from someone we visited a month ago. Part of me says strike while the iron's hot. Some of it says you got to spread out this content over a longer period of time. He's only going into junior year. How do we do that? Let's slow it down. And part of me says it's the student tour guide writing it. You get it when it gets done, because they're a student, they have other things. So, I'm torn on that. We've been invited to one of the institution's parental portals. No other institution has invited us to a parental portal. Surprised a bit by that. I thought more would have been inviting or have them set up and have us get an email, hey, log in, see all this content for you. And I would say that tailor personalization piece, that's something I know, Jeremy, you talk about a lot in your work. I talk about a lot in my work, especially with CRM stuff. The opportunity is there. The capability is there. We just haven't learned how to execute on it. And I mean that from talking with him as a student and with me and my wife as a parent.
There's a ton I want to unpack there. And so, Reece, I would love for you to fill in some blanks based on what your dad just said. Okay. Help me understand a couple of things. What do you think makes something personalized?
Well, for the postcards, I like when they're handwritten and you can see that somebody actually took the time to write it, because it just feels like they actually care a lot more when my name's actually on it and they took the time to write it out. Or like I found a few that had just like a silly little drawing in the corner, but it just felt like somebody took the time to do that. So it means a lot more when you can tell that they actually like cared and took the time to write it.
So your dad mentioned to Reece that he was a little surprised that you gravitated towards some of those larger schools. If you're comfortable sharing, what is it about those larger schools that maybe got your attention a little more and got you that much more excited?
I like there being a lot more people that I have the opportunity to talk to, because I go to a fairly large high school with I have like 550 people in my class, and I see those people all the time, and I don't like that. And if I want to see more people, and everywhere I go, see somebody I didn't know before, because it just gives you a much larger pool of people to make friends with. And I just like there being more people.
Makes complete sense. And then this whole idea of maybe going a little farther away from home. I mean, did you have any thoughts about that prior to taking any of these visits? Meaning, again, Reece, were you thinking you might want to stay closer to home, or you really just didn't know? But now that you've seen some of these schools, you're like, I don't know, I'm not worried about where the schools are. I'm more worried about, like you said, does the school have things that I want? And if it happens to be a little farther, I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, I would say that distance from home wasn't really something I thought about. And the schools that we're looking at that are a little farther from home that I like, it's not that they're far from home. I just like the schools and they happen to be farther from home. It doesn't really play into my decision too much.
I appreciate you sharing all of that. And it leads me to wonder, all right, so you went and visited all these schools, 12. Do I have that number right? Is that how many we visited recently?
I think we're right around 12 at this point. Yeah.
So is there anything, Reece, and then Mickey, I'll ask you the same question after he answers. Is there anything that you wish you had known before you went on these visits that would have been helpful? That, well, I know this now, but if a school had told me this, like before we went to visit, it would have been super helpful.
I would say just the way I look at visits in general, because in the beginning, I feel like I judge schools much more based off of their tour. And now I've learned that their tour is completely separate from the actual school. So you have to pay a lot more attention to what you're seeing than necessarily everything that they're saying.
Makes complete sense. Dad, any thoughts on that?
So we started our first couple of tours with some schools that weren't necessarily high on the list, but were local to us so we could get our feet wet. We happened to go, I think, on every tour, all of them that we've taken has been when students weren't in classes, at least during one of the two primary semesters. The ones we got our feet wet with, those were like spring breaks for the schools. So there weren't students there. One was after school had ended, so we didn't have students there. And the others have been over summer when there have been summer classes. And so I think one of the big things as we think about the next way to whittle this down, and keep in mind that when we have 5 more to go, all 5 are larger schools. So we might not eliminate any of them if size is of that much importance from there. And so instead of going from 17, 18 down to 5 or 6, we might go from 17, 18 down to 15. And so as we think about how to narrow that down, one of the key things that I think is important for Reece to see is, what does 15,000 students look like in person, right? Versus 5,000. Because if you're at a school now that's got, say, 2,000 students in terms of high school, you know what that feels like. You want bigger. But maybe 5,000 is big enough. Once you see 5,000 on a small campus versus 15,000, 25,000, and let's get that confirmed. Distance isn't I personally hope that he's not moving across the country, but distance isn't as concerning for me. We're fortunate. We live in the United States. Getting to and from somewhere is something that can be achieved. if you put your mind to it. There are trains, there are vehicles, there are planes. We have a path to get there. But if we're looking at a school pretty far up in the Northeast, let's see what that school's winter is like. Reece just showed me a video clip yesterday from a school with students walking to class that they filmed, and it was snowing. It was also in April. Well, what does it mean to be getting snow in April? That means you probably started getting at the end of October, early November. That's 6 months of winter. What does that feel like if you're going to walk 15 minutes across campus and it's 0 degrees? And one of these schools, in that particular one where you showed me the clip, by the way, is a school that on the tour proudly said, we haven't had a snow day in decades.
I think it was 40 years.
40 years. There we go. 40 years. So if you don't get snow days, mind you, a school about an hour and a half south of there, so they get 2 or 3 a year, right? So what does that feel like walking across campus in March when it's 10 degrees, 20 degrees? Is he going to be comfortable with that? We live in Pennsylvania. We have a winter, but it's not 0 degrees for more than a few days in a row. If ever in a winter. When's the last time you felt 0? So I'm not opposed. I just want him to feel it. And so you can think, okay, do I want to do this every day? Because that's not going to be easy. I mean, at least it would be for me.
And that's the challenge, right? I mean, I'll share a fun story with you both and the listeners. I lived in northern Minnesota with my family for 4 years, and I was a college basketball coach before I got into what I do now. And one of the schools I coached at, Reece, is in northern Minnesota, sits on a huge lake. The ice gets on the lake probably September and doesn't go off until about April or May. But here's the thing. The whole campus, other than there's about 200 feet, is connected by underground tunnels. So students literally, when it's minus 30 out, walk to class in January in shorts and a t-shirt because they're underground and they never have to go outside if they don't want to. So we talk a lot. You just did this a bunch in your previous answer, Mickey, and Reece, you've used the word too, right? This word of feel or feelings comes into play a lot during the college search process, right? Whether it's a student or a parent. So you got to some of these campuses, and I'm not asking you to name schools, obviously, Reece, but it sounds like, based on what I saw your dad post, you knew within a matter of seconds or minutes, yeah, no, this place is not, this is not my jam. This is not where I want to be. How do you ultimately figure that out with all these different schools? And how quickly does that happen once you actually see some of these schools?
It's difficult to explain. It's just how the people there act, how they talk, how friendly they seem, how approachable they seem. The one school we went to, I ruled it out pretty quickly. All the buildings smelled in their own unique ways and was not feeling that. And the lighting was all super dim and it felt like I was in a basement the entire time. And I was like, this is not good. I don't like this at all. So that got ruled out pretty quickly. But just a lot of how the people are, as long as the buildings don't smell funny, usually that's a good indicator if I don't want to be there. Lighting, lots of natural lighting. The more natural lighting, the better. As long as it doesn't feel like I'm in a basement, it's pretty good.
What's interesting is that particular institution we visited, independently, I think everyone felt the same way about that particular one, that it was an instant no from, well, I won't say we're taking our youngest with us, our daughter. We have a daughter's 11. So she's along with us. But aside from her, I think everyone else kind of felt that way. I probably wasn't as strong feeling that way as my wife and Reece, but they both were instant. This is a definite no on the list. So that was very intriguing. And one of the things we've done at the end of these tours, each campus tour, for most of them, we've been able to go somewhere and have a meal after. And after we order food and we're waiting on food, we typically do a round robin. What did you think? Reece typically gets us kicked off with that conversation. Apparently, though, I need to find his phone because there's some comments maybe on there that I've not heard or seen. But I'm kidding. I've never gone into his phone like that. But we typically go a little bit around and let everybody kind of express an opinion. And that way he can hear our thoughts about it, what we saw. Maybe we saw something different. And then I always have an idea of what's going to, how positive or negative it is. Once you finish your tour, we always go to the college store. Did he want to buy something? That's always a good indicator to me. This has been a summer of windbreakers.
I love the windbreakers that everybody has.
So there's a particular style or brand I think that he really liked. But I think it's important to be able to sit and reflect while it's fresh in your mind, to have that thought process. And that way it helps you think about it later. My wife, Reese's Bob, is a planner. And so she really has the collection of all the notes and will take everyone's thoughts. And that way, when it's time to have a deeper discussion, she will pull it all back up for us for certain.
Halfway through the trip, I started like just little notes. I wouldn't take notes throughout the tour. I would wait till the end and write down what I remembered, because I figured that was probably the most important stuff anyways, if I remembered it throughout the entire tour. If it was the most memorable, then that's probably worth writing down.
What was, Reece, and again, you don't have to name the school, but just when you think about all these schools you just visited, what was the most memorable thing that the school did on one of these tours where you were like, that's awesome, I really enjoyed that, either because it felt personal to you or maybe it was just something that was fun and cool?
Well, I always like free stuff, so it's always off to a good start when they give you some free stuff. I don't know about general things they did. I like when the tour guides have like jokes. I remember those. Remember the one school, the tour guide had a few jokes and I thought they were pretty funny, and I remembered those. One school gave us carrot cake. That was pretty cool. Remembered that. Not necessarily something they did during the tour, but the one school had February admission where you start in February and then you graduate in February. And when you graduate, you get to ski down the hill in your like cap and gown, or you can go down on a mattress or whatever you want. And I thought that was really cool.
Hey there, it's Mallory, Chief Strategist of Enrollify. Higher ed is facing a leadership crisis. The demands on today's college and university leaders are skyrocketing, and talent is leaving the industry at an unprecedented rate. New leaders like you are emerging, but no one is getting the proper training to be successful. Well, Enrollify is here to change that. Our new course, Lessons in Leadership, taught by Dr. Carrie Phillips, will prepare you to be a confident, empathetic, and effective leader. From systems thinking to adaptive leadership, building culture to handling difficult decisions, this comprehensive online course is perfect for new and aspiring leaders. Don't wait. The course starts September 9th, and for a lucky group of 26 students, we have the option to add interactive sessions with Dr. Phillips for personalized guidance. Visit enrollify.org to learn more.
I would be curious to know, Reece, if you could, and if it takes a second for you to think about this, totally okay. If a school said, hey, Reece, you tell us what you want to do, and we'll make this visit exactly what you want it to be. How much of, again, the perfect visit, if we want to call it that, I'm sure nothing can be perfect, but if we want to call it that, how much of it is, I want to see the dorms and where I'm going to eat or where I'm going to have class versus I want to sit in meetings and talk to different people? How much of it is show me versus tell me, if that makes sense?
I always like to see a dorm room. I do not like it when they don't show us at all, because it almost feels like, well, what are you hiding? Why are you hiding that? Is it really bad? And so I want to see where I'm going to live, because I'm going to live there. I'd like to at least see it. And I like to see just the options for what I'm going to eat, because I can't have gluten. So it plays very heavily into where I can go, because if they don't have options for me, then I can't go there unless I'm going to eat off campus all the time. So I do like to see those things, but not for a long time. Like, I like that to be very quick. You step in the dorm room, you like spin in a circle, you see it, and then we move on, because there's not a whole lot else to see. So I like to see all those options. And for sitting down and talking about things, I don't know about sitting down and talking about things like with an admissions counselor versus an actual student, because I'd like to talk to actual students and maybe students that aren't tour guides too, because they're not like required by the school to say like, oh, I love it here. If you don't, I want to know that. And I want to know why. I always like that when the tour guides are super honest. We had one tour guide, he was very honest about everything that he liked and the things that he didn't like. And I really appreciated that, because it felt like he wasn't trying to hide any of the negative parts of going to that school, because obviously every school is going to have pros and cons. So I like it when you get to see both sides, and it's not like they're only trying to show you the very best. And because everywhere isn't always 100% great, you got to know the other side of it too.
Yeah, authenticity has been, as your dad knows, a buzzword, I feel like, in the space that he and I work in terms of what students are looking for in their college search, right? And I think authenticity, part of it, Reece, you tell me if you disagree, but I think it boils down to what you just said, right? Just be honest, meaning I know there's good and bad parts. Just tell me both. Otherwise, I wonder, like, are you hiding something that you don't want to tell me, right?
Yeah.
I think not everyone can articulate that desire for authenticity, but they all have it and they all see it and know it when they're not getting it, right? You know when someone's scripted in what they're saying about their own personal experience. You know when maybe it's because they're fresh in our minds and we've been on a lot of tours, but you know when a tour guide's giving you a personal example and it's inserted into the moment when they're supposed to give the personal example. Like it comes across, and you don't have to be an expert on giving tours to sense, to feel that this is what is occurring. And you may not explicitly think and stop and think, oh, they're inserting this story right now because this is when they're supposed to do it. You're not thinking that, but it's not authentic and you know something's off. And I always think of it as how many times does something need to be off before you're turned off? We all have different numbers. And it depends on how big the off thing is. But there's a threshold you'll cross. There was one tour, and it was one of the last ones we went on. So at larger school, larger group of people there for a tour, so you break into subgroups when you go out on the tour. Most schools, when you're going off, there's a slightly different path. But this particular school had everybody on the same path. So each group kept crossing each other and having to pause. Or if you're at the back of your group, you have to lean and listen because you hear the other group talking behind you. It was awkward and it interrupted the flow probably 4 or 5 times. Now, that might not be horrific, but then if you insert the other things that could throw it off, you could be turned off a little faster. Or the amount of which you like a school drops, and it could have been one of the ones at the top, and now it's in the middle. I don't know. Those types of things, I think, impact my thought when I'm going through this and when I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to take notes on my phone during the tour, and I'm trying to distinguish between what is a note for our family versus a note for my work. And one of the things I really, through this entire experience, I want to get on a college campus with our youngest, and I want to record her giving her college tour. I want her to give the tour. She can't. She's learned what the guides are going to say. And so typically when it's the 4 of us, Reece and his mom are kind of walking together. And then my daughter, Charlotte, and I are kind of walking together. And she'll nudge me when we're talking about student activities, especially. You can this club. And don't forget, if you have an interest you don't see, you can make your own. She knows when it's about to happen, and she'll nudge me to say that that's coming. And we've actually had to stop her a couple times because she's like starting on the tour. She'll turn around and start walking backwards herself and start pointing to stuff. And it's so funny to see. I was like, don't do that because that's interrupting the tour and you would throw off the tour guide. But she knows. And so I want to record her because she's 11. But to see how similar they really are. And it'll be funny, I think, for people to see an 11-year-old give a college tour. But
well, and to your point, it shouldn't be surprising, though, I think, to anybody listening to this, to that point, Mickey, even an 11-year-old can figure out when something is completely scripted, right? And when, oh, guess what? This is exactly like the last 7 we went on, right, with my brother. And so this is something that, again, has been a problem for years. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why that we don't need to get into today. But anybody listening to this, you've got to audit your tour and you've got to figure out how to make it more personalized, because this is making the college search. I mean, Reece, you tell me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you can disagree with me. It's okay. Do you think it makes it harder? Your dad talked about getting that list down to a more manageable number of schools you might apply to. Do you think it's harder because so many of these tours all run together, like you said earlier?
Yeah, if they were more separate and different, and I could, like, in my mind know which school was which, it would be much easier to, like, sort through and think that one wasn't as good. I don't like it as much. But they all kind of run together in my mind because so many of the tours were so similar. And when I think about, like, my top schools, I remember those tour guides, and they were more telling facts about the school, but also talking about their personal experiences. And when I think about those top schools, those tours were always just better. The tour guides were always just more free, and it didn't feel like they were scripted as much. Because the one school we went to, the entire time I was thinking, this guy is so scripted. I wish he would just actually talk about how he's feeling. And then at the end of the tour, all the tours ended in the same spot, and he was talking, and the group next to us, the girl that was giving that tour was saying the exact same thing. And I was like, this is everybody's saying the same thing. Nobody's putting any personalization into this at all. They're just word vomiting at me, and they don't, it didn't feel like they cared as much.
2 seconds into that, I knew exactly which school he was talking about.
Yeah, because we talked about it there.
It's so clear when it's that scripted.
So I want to come back for sure, Reece, and talk to you a little bit more about this idea of personalization, but more so when it comes to all these messages now that schools are sending you. But I want to ask first, before we do that, Mickey, from a parent point of view, we know how important parents are in terms of parent, guardian, the role they play in this entire process, right, with a student. Did you feel like any of these tours actually prioritized parents in any way, or do you feel like parents kind of felt like an afterthought on almost all these tours?
No, they did not feel, and they didn't even feel like an afterthought. They were not a thought. And part of my reflection on this is I'm wondering, some colleges intentionally avoiding us, thinking, oh, this is, we can't talk to the parents. This is a college age student. We need to talk to the students. Similarly, as once they're enrolled, you work with a student, you want to help them grow and become an informed, involved adult. And so you also have laws and regulations that say you can't talk to parents. And I don't know how much of that bleeds into that, but it's not a forethought. It's not an afterthought. It's a no thought involvement. And it's not that I want it for me, but I'm thinking of all the other parents. Parents are the number one influencers. Why, if I'm getting an email from a school, I don't think I've received more than a couple that were to me. The rest were just a carbon copy of what they sent Reece. A couple have been to me, and I actually appreciate that a bit more, because what you say to him, you can talk about the same thing, but it needs to be different to me as the parent. Why does it matter to me as a parent? Not, dear Reece, please attend this open house. It's, Mickey, if Reece has the ability to go to this open house, this is what he would learn. This is what you might come out of it with. Those types of things. How do you help your son, daughter, child, whatever? How do you help them process what's right in a college fit? That type of advice, I would suspect, would be well received by most parents. I suspect, because of my role in understanding on the backside of things, I have a bias there, and I want to try to remove that. But, and I think the easiest way is to say, well, do something instead of nothing. That's step one. But then you can start to understand what might be of most interest and then tailor it to parents.
Well, somebody who's similar to you has been doing for 10 years, and I think I can take bias, completely out of this. I hate to say it, but I have to agree with you that the number of schools I go to that still don't have any sort of dedicated parent comm flow doesn't exist. It's just carbon copy, like you said, of everything they send in your example, Reece. Or I've been on enough campus visits myself when I do campus visit audits, and it's everything that you and Reece both talked about earlier, between walking backwards, word vomit. Oh, we can't show you the dorms. Oh, the exact same tour is being given literally verbatim right over there. At the end of the day, parents are not an afterthought. We know that in this process. That's not news to anybody listening to this. But I tell people all the time, if you want this whole process to stand out more for your school, you have to, besides doing some of the stuff Reece shared earlier with students, prioritize parents more in this entire process, because most schools aren't. And so just by default, you will stand out when you do that, right?
I've thought about the idea, do you take on a campus tour, do you separate students and parents on a tour?
Reece, can I ask you, pause there, Mickey? How would you feel if you got separated, not for an entire tour, but let's say like at some point during the tour, you had to go one way with the tour guide or maybe a current student, and your parents went the other way for like 15, 20 minutes. Would that freak you out?
Not, if it was like a common thing, not really. But if we just showed up to one school and they were like, we're actually going to split here, I'd be like, what is going on? I would want to know beforehand that there was going to be a section like that, but I wouldn't mind if I knew like beforehand.
Do you ever wish, and again, I know your dad's not going to get mad at you, so be honest. Do you ever wish there were times you talked about wanting to talk to current students that a college would, for example, say, the tour guide says, well, Reece, we can go talk to a student about this intramural or whatever it might be. And then mom and dad go off as an admissions counselor or somebody from financial aid. Do you ever think that would be helpful for you? Or you're like, I don't know, I've never really thought about that.
No, I think that would be helpful because the financial aid part doesn't really affect me, or at least in my head right now it doesn't. So I don't want to go hear about the financial aid. It's not interesting to me and I won't remember it. But it does matter a lot more to my parents who will hopefully be helping me pay for it. And I'd like to go talk to somebody that actually attends the school about what they like to do outside of school. So I think that would be helpful.
What do your friends have to say about all this if you're comfortable sharing? I mean, I got to believe you're not the only student, right, you're friends with, Reece, who's done some college visits. Maybe they haven't done as many as you, but even if they haven't hypothetically done any campus visits, when you and your friends talk about college, what are some of the things that come up if you're comfortable sharing?
A lot of my friends, most of them have not done college tours because it's still early. They're all very jealous of me going on college tours. They all wish that they could go. But a lot of them seem just very overwhelmed with the amount of options. They don't even know where to start to look. And I feel like I'd be in the same boat if I didn't have, like, my dad obviously works with a lot of colleges and he already knows a lot of this stuff. But most of my friends are very overwhelmed. They have no idea where they want to go. Like, my one friend wants to go to either UCLA or like North Carolina. Those are completely different things, focusing in completely different areas. Like, my friends generally don't even know where to begin.
I appreciate you feeling comfortable sharing. That word overwhelmed comes up a ton. And you're right. There are so many students who don't know where to even start in this process. And I think that, again, is another opportunity back to personalization for colleges to say, well, instead of us just word vomiting all this information, why not ahead of a tour, ask Reece, ask mom and dad, what are you all feeling about this college search process? And what's your comfort level in like understanding how certain stuff works? And then if it isn't, for example, like you just said with your friends, maybe what it has now become for you all as a family, maybe we just tweak the tour and tweak the visit a little bit so that you all leave feeling a little bit more like, okay, cool. It's still overwhelming, but now I feel like I at least have a better understanding, right?
Yeah.
So a couple of things there I would love to then pick your brain on, just random things, Reece, that have come up as we've been talking. Do you remember the names of any of the tour guides at any of the schools you visited?
One. I remember one person's name.
Okay. And does that school happen to be a school that you're still highly considering that you think is one of your top schools right now?
Yeah, I'd say so. Probably top 5.
Dad, Mickey, do you know the name of any admissions counselor at any of the schools that your son has visited?
No. I don't know that I got introduced to any there. I know I've got emails from some, but I don't recall the admission counselor name. I remember one tour guide name, and it's actually the one school that we eliminated right away.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I thought that tour guide did okay.
Yeah, I don't remember her name.
Yeah, that's one. I don't remember that. It was interesting because some schools have two tour guides that are team up. I think we had 2 experiences specifically with that.
Yeah.
One that went really well, one that went really poorly. Meaning one tandem did really well being a tandem and tag team stuff. The other tag team did what they talked about, but they just talked to each other in between stops. They didn't they didn't engage anyone else. It's let's talk. Well, stopping, look here, script. Let's move on. Talk to each other. And that one stood out. Now that is a school that's higher on our list, but the reason it's higher on the list is because we had an academic tour of the academic facility of a program that we're interested in. And that was a one-on-one tour with a senior in that. And we really got a good behind the scenes look.
Yeah.
And did that student at that school, Reece, talk to you a little bit again about, hey, this is what it was like for me when I came in as a first year student and all that kind of stuff? Or what made that such a positive experience for you that your dad just talked about?
It was just being talked to one-on-one, less like it felt less like a tour and more like I was just getting to talk to a student there. It didn't feel like the tour guy was up here and I'm down here. It made it closer to like the same level.
All right, so Reece, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about all these lovely, not just postcards, but like emails and other messages that you've got. Now, fill in the blanks for me because I've been getting bits and pieces from Dad's social media and LinkedIn. Have you read any emails yet from any school that has sent you anything? Do you have any idea what the number would be?
Maybe 3. They all look so similar that nothing really makes me want to open one more than the other because they all say, "Hi, Reece, look at our whatever thing." And I read that and I'm like, why do I want to look at yours over everybody else's? You're all sending me the exact same email, except you insert your school name. It just looks, it's the exact same. And I don't care to read it. Not very interesting.
The 3 emails that you said that you've read, if you can remember, did your parents read those and say, oh, you should read those? Or did you just read them before your parents even read them? And what was it that got your attention in them?
I read them and it was mentioning like a specific program that I was like, oh, that's cool. I want to see what they have to say about that.
And so I assume, but again, you tell me, if something in the subject line then is relatable to you or something that piques your attention, that would be a good thing?
Yes, that would be, as long as it's not just the hi Reece, that personalization is not enough. You can't just say my name because everybody's doing that. There has to be something else that would actually get my attention.
Reece, is there anything that you wish colleges would talk about more? I mean, we've talked about some of the things that are important to you, but is there anything where you're just like, gosh, I went on all these tours, or the couple emails I have read, like, why don't they talk about this or that? Because I would love to know more about that. And I didn't hear about it on the tour. I feel like I'm not hearing about it if I read any of these messages.
Just as much as possible about student life, I would say, is important for me to hear. You can learn all of the academic stuff on the school's website. Like, you can find every academic thing that they're saying all on the website. If they have stuff about student life on the website, I don't know how much I trust that because that's the school saying it. It's more important if it's coming from an actual student that has actual experiences. So I'd say talking about that kind of stuff as much as possible is very important.
Mickey, I'm curious because I have to believe you and Reece's mom have talked about this. What's the hardest, most confusing part then for you as parents right now so far in this process?
For me right now, and for my wife, I would say it's the alignment with the academic side. He's filling out and getting a sense of that student life side. That's important for us as well. But if it's the best personal fit, but doesn't have the right academic fit, is that the right fit? And so, being sure, as someone who started their undergraduate career, a first year student as an economics major, and by midway through a sophomore year being a theater major, yes, you have to understand and respect that people change majors. What I'm curious about is, how closely fit is the academic interest? Because you're not going to be able to pick and choose what an alternative may be if Reece decides to change the major. But what are the options going to be if he does choose? Is this more of an engineering-minded school? I don't think he's going to go into that if he changes a major. I don't think that's going to be where he fits. And that's also obviously a major you don't transfer into without adding 2 or 3 more years to your college career. But, what are those alternatives? So I think that is important. And I think it will become more important for him after he moves beyond, let's find the fit. These are the schools I think have the best fit. Now let's start looking at what's next. Let's start, for him, might be that academic fit. And then the financial piece will probably be, for him, will be the last part of that consideration. So I think, for me, it's that, one of the things I think we came back from this leg of the tours and talked about is, at least my wife and I talked a lot about, well, this academic fit, what is the career path? What are the job opportunities? What are those, things parents worry about? What is the pay for that type of job? And that's the first time she and I had that type of conversation. She worries about that a little bit more than I do, in the sense that my perspective is my undergrad was in theater. I actually use my degree every day without fail. I may not be doing in my career what I thought I wanted to do when I was a theater major. We're having this conversation for a podcast. This is a form of a performance. I do that every day. I might direct a team. Those things I use. So I don't necessarily see an academic major as these are the 4 careers you're going to do. I see the opportunity beyond that, how you can apply it. So I think there's that piece, but knowing that there's that fit somehow and that there are alternatives if there needs to be a change, that's important to me.
Yeah, and it makes complete sense. And I can tell you because we interview students here at Tutor Collegiate Strategies after they've completed their college search while it's fresh in their brain. And we asked them, there's like 19, 20 different things, Mickey and Reece, that we asked them when it came time to choose whatever school they chose, like how important were these things in your decision? And so you rank them all, like you give them a score, right? 1, didn't even think about it, didn't factor in my decision. 10, oh my gosh, one of the top reasons why I chose this school. The top 3 or 4 things, you know what they are, and they have been for 10 years. The feel of campus, literally that's how it's worded on the survey, right? The customer service, we specifically say how the admission staff treated you throughout the process, but like the customer service aspect, and then what you just talked about there, Mickey, which is student outcomes after graduation. That has become something even pre-COVID that students started to tell us. I may not have realized it when I was Reece's age going into my junior year, but now that I'm actually going and the process is complete, you're right. I'm thinking more about what does that path look like that's going to get me from being a first year student ultimately to starting a professional career, right?
Yeah.
All right. Then I would love to get one more piece of advice for you to give to colleges if you're comfortable sharing, Reece. If they want to get the attention of you and your friends more in this entire process, whether it's on a tour, whether it's to read more emails, what advice would you give colleges and universities about communicating with your generation?
Personalization means everything. Any personalization that you can have, it makes a huge difference.
Reece, Mickey, I greatly appreciate you both being on with me today and just feeling so comfortable sharing things. I think, the word I wrote down about halfway through, Reece, when you were talking is eye-opening, and it's not eye-opening, I would argue, for me or your dad, but I'm hoping that a lot of people listening today, it was eye-opening for on the college, admissions and marketing side. So thank you both again for being on and sharing so much today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
And a final thank you to you, the listener. I love getting emails and messages on social media and being out on the road and having people share how much value they continue to find in this podcast. On that note, I'm super excited to share that season 4 of Mission Admissions is already in the works and new episodes will be released this fall. If you have some feedback for me or a topic suggestion, I'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and email that to me at Jeremy, Jeremy, @dantutor.com. Jeremy at dantutor.com. See you back here soon. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a number of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admission professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Day Cabilds, and so many other amazing leaders in the higher ed space. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create more meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com.